When someone experiences deep personal pain, a natural question always follows. Does God actually feel this, or is he just watching from a distance? This diagram represents the classical concept of an unchanging, self-sufficient divine essence. For most of Christian history, theologians relied on this idea, known as divine impassibility. It means that God's perfect nature cannot be altered, diminished, or made to suffer by outside forces. But the 20th century brought a scale of trauma that made an unfeeling God incredibly difficult to accept. After 2 world wars and the Holocaust, a strictly impassible God started to look unbearable to many people. Writing from a Nazi prison cell, the theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer concluded, "Only the suffering God can help." The focus shifted toward a God who stands in complete solidarity with human pain. This creates friction with classical theology. The Bible uses intense emotional vocabulary to describe God. It says, he grieves, he experiences fierce covenantal love, and he reacts with moral anger. We are left with a severe dilemma. If God is completely immune to feeling, he cannot truly love. But if he is highly vulnerable to the world's pain, he might not possess the absolute strength required to save us from it. Resolving this tension means looking at 4 major theological paths drawn over the centuries, testing each one to find which can hold together both his absolute reliability and his genuine empathy. The first path is strict impassibility. This approach argues God cannot suffer in any sense whatsoever. To accept this, you must read the rich emotional language of the Bible as purely metaphorical, a human projection onto a God who actually has no such states. The second path swings the other way. It's an ancient idea called patripassianism, which claims the Father himself suffered on the cross. The early church condemned this because it improperly collapses the distinct persons of the Trinity, ignoring that it was the Son, not the Father, who became human. The third path is a popular modern approach known as process theology. It offers a very appealing claim that God genuinely suffers in his divine nature, experiencing pain right alongside humanity. This flowchart illustrates the problem. If the chaos of creation alters God's divine essence, he is no longer sovereign. He becomes a fellow victim. A God deformed by external evil loses his structural integrity and cannot guarantee his promises. A God who suffers with us but lacks the unchangeable power to deliver us from that suffering doesn't actually solve the problem. That brings us to the fourth path, impassibility properly defined. The historic Christian tradition makes a vital distinction between passions, changes forced upon someone from outside, and affections, which are deep, genuine emotional responses that flow naturally from an unchanging character. God has affections, not passions. This theology moves from theory to reality at a specific historical moment, the incarnation of Christ and the cross. This diagram maps the incarnation. The impassible Son took on a second, human nature within his one unified person. The physical agony of the cross was genuinely experienced and absorbed entirely through the human nature, leaving the divine nature pristine. The Father, meanwhile, did not physically suffer on the cross. Instead, he experienced the immense intentional cost of giving up his beloved Son, engaging deeply with the sacrifice without losing his transcendent relationship to creation. The impassible God did not become passible. He took on a passible nature to enter our darkness. This preserves his absolute divine strength right alongside his genuine human empathy. This framework is not some philosophical trick to keep both sides happy. It is the only way the cross carries its true weight, as a literal historical moment where a divine person walked directly into human pain. Because God's essential divine nature cannot be diminished, his promises are completely reliable. Your pain cannot erode his character or threaten his ability to save. And because the Son genuinely suffered in the flesh, he acts as a high priest. When you pray in anguish, you are speaking to someone who intimately knows the exact physical and emotional texture of that pain. The cross shows us exactly what divine love looks like. God was not a helpless victim overwhelmed by evil. He deliberately stepped into suffering to defeat it. But the suffering is not the final word. The crucified God is now the risen, victorious Lord. His pain is in the past. God is neither a distant, unfeeling rock, nor a weak, overwhelmed friend. He is a sovereign Savior who has carried our deepest sorrows and who guarantees our ultimate deliverance.